This is OS from the BBC World Service. I want to return to Hong Kong again. We've spoken about it many times, the protests that have been taking place there. But in particular, I want to speak about a video that has been circulating on Chinese social media that our China media analyst Kerry Allen alerted us to. Kerry's back down with us. Good to have you with us. What does the video show?
Well, the video originally was reportedly by Associated Press, and it shows a man called Peter in Hong Kong, and he says he's been there for 35 years, and he says that the protesters made him cry, that they should respect rule of law in the country, and it almost feeds into the Communist Party's line of that these protests are not peaceful, they're violent, they're angry, but because he's Western looking, he's a British man, it's almost kind of, Chinese people are watching this and they're seeing this video today. And what they've seen before, they've seen all the Communist Party's kind of messages about what China says. But the fact that somebody who's British is saying, I live here, I'm finding this very hard to deal with, it's really stuck a tone with Chinese people. And they basically get the impression that this is what the wider world thinks. And they're saying, I watched this video, this poor man, he's been crying, really upset for him. And it just shows that literally everybody is unhappy in Hong Kong, that literally this is what's happening.
But also, when I was looking at that is just one man, because we have been trying to take the pulse or understand what the reaction has been in society in Hong Kong when it comes to Monday night's rather dramatic breaking into the Legislative Council, but somehow this man has resonated.
Yes, exactly. Because he's Western looking, but also, Chinese people get the impression that Western media just want to create damning reports about Hong Kong. They say that Hong Kong is a part of mainland China, and there shouldn't be these hooligans who are being brainwashed by the Western world coming in and basically trying to disrupt the city. So they're saying that they're using this video, and they're saying that this shows that Western media are almost self-censoring themselves. They're saying, how come it kind of shows that Chinese people do have some exposure to Western media, but they're saying the BBC, for example, this isn't showing people like this. So they're quite angry, and they're saying that Western journalism is biased.
And so it is coming down to perhaps a war of words, which brings me, Kerry, to my next interview. And it's somebody actually who we've spoken to many times as we talk about the protests in Hong Kong. It really began, as Kerry was telling us as well in previous programmes, about this extradition bill that would have allowed the government to deport people to the Chinese mainland in a more easier fashion to face trial. Monday, as we were talking about, there was those dramatic, I suppose, break-in, you could call it, or storming, or there's been lots of different verbs used, but basically the protesters entered the government building with force, which is known as the LegCo, or Legislative Council, and we were speaking to demonstrators that were outside the building watching this. One of them was John. It's not his real name. We've spoken to him a number of times, and I wanted to catch up with him today to hear how he's feeling now.
I think me, along with many others, I believe, feel tired for sure, and a bit helpless and quite lost as well.
That sounds to me, John, very different, to be quite honest, from where you were when we spoke on Monday. What is it that's causing those feelings?
Well, first of all, I think it's after the movement, after such a big event with so much energy, people are all exhausted. But I believe that actually the sense of helplessness was also present in the crowd and even in myself on Monday. And I think it's particularly in those who stormed the LegCo, because I think the understanding among us, and we do really feel for them, those who stormed the LegCo, that they did what they did because they felt helpless. They felt that peaceful protests have not been effective. The government wouldn't respect or honor if you just talk to them peacefully, and therefore out of desperation, they felt that that's the only thing they could do.
And you still stand with them, it sounds to me. If the authorities were listening now and they hear that you feel helpless, tired, it may make them think that, in fact, the authorities this time have won the battle.
I think that they might well think so. In a way, there is limited options that we have at our disposal, but I think that me, along with I think many others, are quite resilient and insistent on bringing this movement to some sort of fruition, both to honor the three individuals who have sacrificed their lives because of this movement, because they felt desperate, but also we felt that the government do owe us a response for what they have done.
Let me stop you there for a moment. You say three people that have sacrificed their lives. What do you mean by that for our listeners?
Three persons have taken their own lives in protest of this movement. The very first one were standing on a scaffolding outside of Pacific Place, which is a shopping mall next to the Legislative Council. He was standing on the scaffolding, putting up a sign to call for the government's response to the 5 men by the public. And I believe, we're not sure how exactly he fell down. He did leave a letter before he went out on that scaffolding to call for those demands and say that he was determined to do this. But I think also how through accident he fell down as the firemen were trying to rescue him. And then after that, two teenagers also took their own lives and left messages either on the social media, or one of them left a message on the wall at the spot where she jumped off, calling for the government's response.
I just want to underline that we cannot know exactly what was going through the minds of these people, or we can't know any other issues that they may have had. And you also say with that first instance, was it partly accidental? I know there is that letter that he left, but it's just so difficult when it comes to the issue of suicide, of what might be other factors as well. But I hear your concern.
I think I can rephrase it slightly. I think the public believes that what they see as three of their fellow protesters taking their own lives, that's the perception of the public. And they felt strongly about not abandoning them. And therefore, their will was strengthened or further encouraged by that.
So you talk about limited options. What do you think might happen next?
I think that a lot of the people who are in the movement see what they can do now is to engage in an opinion warfare against the authorities, who is obviously also trying to sway the public opinion to become less sympathetic to the movement. So they are trying to do all they can to make sure to persuade the other half of the public, or those who are condemning or concerned about the storming of the Legislative Council, to explain to them why it took place. And also, I think they're also trying to take steps. I saw online protesters announcing that they will go out again on the 7th of July to actually engage with the mainland tourists, to hopefully bring the message of Hong Kong, what's going on in Hong Kong, and explain that to them, and hopefully they can also bring that to the mainland.
Thanks very much to John, not his real name, Kerry Allen, also listening. What about that, though? Going to mainland Chinese tourists that are in Hong Kong and trying to convince them?
It's going to be very hard, yeah. I mean, there are people that have limitations on travelling over the border, but this sense keeps on coming out of mainland China that everybody just wants people to be safe and, no disruptions.
We'll continue following it. Thanks very much to John. Thanks very much to Kerry Allen. You're listening to OS from the BBC World Service.